Hey, keep this one off the record, but it's time for another interview on Growing Up Punk. Hey, welcome to 2020, friends. We're back. Took a little bit of a break for Christmas and the New Year's, that kind of stuff. But before Christmas, Aaron had the chance to sit down with Ryan from Off the Record. You remember them, right? From the early 2000s, Tooth and Nail skate punk band. Before we get into that interview, though, let's get the social media stuff out of the way. Go ahead, follow us on Twitter at GrowingPunkPod. You can also follow us on Instagram at GrowingUpPunk. If you want to follow Aaron, he's on Instagram at AaronGrewUpPunk. And if you want to follow myself, Instagram and Twitter at DavidGrowingUp. But without wasting any more of your time, we're going to get into the interview. Aaron and Ryan from Off the Record. But first, let's refresh our memories a little bit. Remember when? Off the Record? This is good times. And Off the Record on Growing Up Punk. And then on the other side of that, it's Aaron and Ryan, and they're talking. So stick around.
Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we were just chatting here before I hit record and just getting some tidbits about the band, and so I figured we don't want to miss out on anything. But let's kind of like pull it back a bit to just kind of what got you into music. You know, kind of what age were you? What was going on in your life at that point? Was there anything like significant happening either in the music scene or just whatever it was that kind of got you into music?
Sure. So my dad had played guitar. He was kind of in like the Jesus movement of the 70s, playing in an acoustic type band. And I never really showed much interest in it growing up. I saw him have it out and he'd be playing it and whatnot. But in the summer of 92, my good friend Chris, who actually became the bass player of Off the Record, had to spend the summer in San Francisco with his dad. So I was kind of left without my friend. And my dad thought it'd be a good time to teach me how to play guitar, kind of occupy my summertime. So he put an acoustic guitar in my hand and kind of showed me some Beatles songs. And I just ran with it. That was like, enlightenment to me. A light bulb went on in my head. Like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. I always love hearing when people grew up with music in their home. Because for me, it wasn't like that. My sisters took piano lessons, but other than that, none of my family played any musical instruments. And so, I kind of started drums at 12 and kind of went from there. But I'm always envious of people that grew up like that. Their parents were showing them, whether it was stuff like the Beatles or Led Zeppelin or, not necessarily music I really know much about, but just to be exposed to something like that. Like I had to find that all on my own. And so it's always cool just hearing how being exposed to that can kind of lead to other things. So that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure your parents were stoked when you chose drums as your instrument, right?
Well, especially when it was like aggressive music that I wanted to listen to. I bugged them lots about that, but yeah, it's good. Like I've said before, they had no context of what underground heavy music or anything of that. They wouldn't have even known mainstream heavy music or rock music. So instead of them being the influence on me, I was the influence on them. So they can say that they heard XPX first from me.
That's awesome.
Or whatever, but
that's awesome. So so basically after that, I kind of spent that whole summer playing acoustic guitar, a lot of like finger picking stuff. I remember Blackbird by the Beatles was the song. It was like the first song my dad taught me. If you're going to play guitar, like do not learn Blackbird as like your first song, it's a little tech.
Yeah.
But after that, when Chris got back, after the summertime, I was like, dude, we're going to play guitars now. And he was like, all right. He just kind of went with it. He picked up bass shortly thereafter. And I think pretty much from that point forward, this would have been around like 93. That's just all we did we got together on the weekends. We'd play music together. We did a lot of like Smashing Pumpkins stuff.
Cool.
Some Nirvana, some Weezer stuff off the Blue album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just the super easy stuff. But we also kind of started writing little ideas right from the beginning. It wasn't just jamming other people's stuff. You know, I mean, none of it was any good, but we had, you know, some creative ideas that we would work on.
Yeah. So when did so you guys were jamming, and when did like punk music kind of come into play with that?
So that was, 92, 93, we were kind of jamming, you know, playing that kind of stuff. Smashing Pumpkins, Weezer. Dookie by Green Day dropped in 94, and that was the game changer.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
I remember, you know, when we first heard that music and just listened to the energy in it, you know what I mean? And, you know, seeing the videos of that guy playing and whatnot, I was like, dude, this is what I want to do. I want to do stuff like this, you know, and it's super easy too.
Yeah,
well, you got like three chord punk songs, but the amount of energy in it was something that I had never really heard before. And me and Chris both just latched onto it. We learned how to play every single Green Day song in their catalog.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We would get together in my garage and we would play them and we would sing them too. You know, we'd take turns singing different parts and whatnot. And we almost had like a set list down where we would just get together and like do these little shows for ourselves. Super fun. It was good times.
Yeah, with bands like that, I think so many gravitated towards them because, like you said, it was easy when you saw them doing it. It was easy to kind of picture yourself doing the same thing, even though they were, you know, huge and on TV. It wasn't something that seemed so out of place that you wouldn't be able to do it. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Was there what was the music scene like? And what was the city that you grew up in or that you're from?
So we were all from Lakewood, which basically would be like Long Beach, California.
Okay. Yep.
And, you know, super just kind of spoiled with, you know, all the music acts that are in this area.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's so many bands that came out of this area, but, you know, as a fan, you're spoiled with all the bands that are playing. But if you're trying to be in a band, you're kind of on like the losing end though, because the competition is crazy. There's thousands of bands playing every single night in like a 10-mile radius in LA. You know what I mean? So it can be a little challenging, but,
so what were
as far as the music scene,
as
far as the music scene, I mean, we're talking 94, me and Chris were freshmen in high school. It was like Green Day, Offspring. I mean, like pop punk was just kind of getting some radio love, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember these bands basically started doing like the K-Rock Weenie Roast and started playing shows around here. And I can't think of anybody else. Who else was pop punk at that time? I know I'm leaving somebody else out that was like mainstream radio.
Yeah, well, those were definitely the major ones, kind of until maybe a few years later when, you know, bands like Newfound Glory and Yellow Card, and that might have even been, you know, a number of years after that. But
that's like late 90s.
Yeah. It might have mostly just been, you know, Green Day and Offspring. Those are probably the biggest ones there for a number of years, at least until it kind of picked up and people realized, oh, okay, it's okay to, you know, this kind of music is everywhere now, and, you know, it was just more accessible and gave people that kind of gateway to start bands. So that's really sweet. Do you recall what some of those bands were in that area that were maybe like gaining momentum? Like, is there any cool stories of bands from that area that you kind of start or saw, you know, from the beginning and they started seeing as they were just kind of growing their career?
Oh man. Yeah, I got some stories. There's this place in Santa Ana, it's Orange County. It's called Coos Cafe. It's famous. It was a little small house painted like bright colors in the middle of like a downtown area. And the house was empty and they would have bands just play there all the time. You could maybe fit like 30, 40 people in there.
Wow.
But they had super rad shows in there, man. Hardwood floors, like drums in there. It was almost overwhelming, but it sounded just killer. But I saw Eve 6 play in there before they broke. Yeah, I saw them play probably around like 95. And then I think they broke out on K-Rock maybe like a year or two later, you know what I mean? And then they were huge for a short period of time. But other than that, I wasn't, like Hermosa Beach is close to me. Pennywise came out of there.
Right, yeah.
I wasn't much of a Pennywise fan.
Oh, really?
No, I wasn't really my thing, which is funny when, I'm going to jump ahead for a second, but when Tooth and Nail put out the promo flyers for the record that was released, you know how they always did the whole, it sounds like, and then they list some secular bands. The first one on there was Pennywise.
Yeah.
And we all laughed at it because none of us really listened to Pennywise.
Were you guys more like towards the strung out kind of end of things, the more kind of metallic sounding?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
but so for other bands that were kind of coming up around here, Yellow Card was Orange County too, and I don't think we played with them. I think there was supposed to be like a show before they got big, but I don't think it happened. Thrice was Orange County too. We played with Thrice a few times, but that was back when they were like a hardcore band.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool. Like that's the stuff I love hearing is, like to you that was just normal, right? Like for guys like me from up here, like we didn't get exposed to those bands until they were already, signed and big and touring, and so I just love hearing, like from guys from the areas where those bands were coming from, and before they were really known. And
just from being from Southern California though, where there is a ton of music, a ton of bands and stuff, like I didn't really grasp what you're saying right now until we kind of traveled and went, to like the Midwest, and you have a town that's not surrounded by any other town, small population, and you play a show and like 20 kids come to it and they're just super stoked because, bands don't really go through that much.
Right.
But I wasn't really even aware of that until I actually kind of traveled outside my little comfort zone, so growing up in this area, we were definitely spoiled with music.
Yeah. And you're like, that was just kind of the norm, like in your household to go to concerts and stuff, and your parents were okay with that? And
I mean, I grew up in the church, and I want to say in junior high, I got Metallica's "And Justice for All" album, and my dad was not happy with it. He heard me listening to it, and I want to say he took it away from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for a short period of time, I think it was, my parents were trying to gear me to listen towards like Christian music and stuff. But, when I started playing guitar, I mean, my dad was all about it,
Right.
But once I started, playing like, stuff with distortion, a little heavier, I don't think he was, he couldn't relate to it, but,
right.
He was a fan of music. He played in the band himself, so he wasn't going to tell me I couldn't really do it.
Yeah.
But as far as going to shows and whatnot, stuff was pretty local. A lot of these places were all ages, it's not like they were, there wasn't like drinking and stuff going on. Right. So no, my parents were really cool about all of it. They were super supportive.
Was there any like standout like Christian bands or tours that came through that you gravitated towards, or was it more just wanting to go to shows regardless of that?
Once I started going to shows, I actually was not into Christian music. I was aware of MXPX, and I liked a few songs off of Teenage Politics, but that wasn't really my thing. Basically in I want to say it was 96, me and Chris went to the Warp Tour, which was either the first or second year. Not remembering the exact history of it, but, it was over here in Cal State Dominguez Hills. And it was back when the Warp Tour only had like two main stages. They didn't have all the small tents and everything.
Right. Crazy.
And, that year we saw, it was NoFX, Pennywise, Down by Law, Unwritten Law, Blink 182, Face to Face played, and nice. Goldfinger played. Remember them? Goldfinger?
Oh yeah, well, of course, love them.
So, and then that kind of like opened my eyes to this whole, faster paced, punk rock stuff, more aggression, the stuff that wasn't getting the radio love,
Yeah.
and we kind of gravitated more towards that because obviously if it's faster, it's better.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. I can still remember hearing, I've said this before, Slick Shoes' Rusty album, like just putting that on and just being fast from start to finish. Like, I just immediately was like, this is what I've been looking for. I just didn't know how to find it or what it was. Yeah, I totally
Right.
and I love that about punk. It's just the energy of it when you put it on, you just immediately know. And I still do that even now when I'm checking out a punk band. Like I'm fairly, well, some might say snobby. I feel like I know what I'm gonna like, but I'm still like, especially with punk, like it's got to catch me right away. And there's, if it starts with like a palm mute or something that just immediately takes me back to discovering bands, and then I'm hooked.
Yeah, for sure.
So what was on that Warped Tour? Were those bands like gaining quite a bit of exposure already? Like, so you said it was the first few years that Warped Tour started, and it was smaller. So was it still like fairly?
I mean, it was. No, it was a big show. I mean, but nothing compared to what the Warped Tour became years later.
Right.
But I mean, you had bands like NoFX. NoFX has always been big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that was around probably what was the album that came out after Punk and Drublic? The Heavy Petting Zoo, maybe around that era.
Yeah.
So I mean, NoFX always had notoriety. They were big, and same thing with like Face to Face.
Right.
They've always kind of been big, especially since they broke out like on the radio right in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
They had like radio play, and then they kind of just never kept on the radio. But so no, it was a big show, and people, the energy at that Warped Tour, I'd never really seen people just getting destroyed in a pit like that. I remember me and Chris looking at it, being like, "Dude, this is what it's all about right here. If you can play music and have people, just destroy themselves in front of you, that's the ticket."
So did you guys go in, or you were too scared and backed off?
Nah, dude, I was like 5'5" until I turned like 19. I was so tiny. I would have got wrecked.
Yeah. Well, you'd be good at crowd surfing then. Nice and light to throw around. Oh, that's awesome. So when did you connect with the other guys in the band? Like, what's kind of the formation story of Off the Record?
Sure. So, like I said, I grew up in the church, and then I kind of pushed away from it, fell away from it for a little bit. Around like 17, 18, I wanted to get back into it. I knew one of the guys that went to my church. I didn't know him like we were friends, but I was just aware of him. His name was Keith, and that's, Keith Allen, the singer. So I tried to connect with him when I got back into the church, just for like accountability, someone to kind of hang out with you and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I was into playing guitar. Keith somewhat played guitar, and we were just kind of joking around, start talking about, we should, form a band, and I don't really remember the next couple of steps after that, other than us like having a little band started. I think we threw a few songs together. I brought Chris into it, said, "Hey, we're going to try and, form this little band. You want to play bass?" Obviously he was into it. Band was called Boy Wonder.
Nice.
And yeah, you're impressed. I can tell. There was dude, the main thing I remember about it is we did a punk cover of Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice. Yeah. I'm surprised that didn't take off,
Well, you were a few years late on that, but I mean, those Pop Goes Punk, like those became huge years later. So maybe you were so ahead of your time.
That's what it is. But yeah, so we did that. We had a local friend that we all knew named Kenny who was playing drums. And it was me and Keith on guitar, Chris on bass. And I think Keith was already singing. We had a couple songs. We played maybe like 2 shows. And then I got asked to be in another band called All Day Long, who maybe had a little bit more notoriety. They were playing somewhat bigger shows. So I just up and bailed on Boy Wonder. I kind of left them hanging there. They carried on for a little bit, without me, I want to say they did like some ska stuff too. The music changed. I mean, that was right in like the hot era of ska, right? Like 95, like Real Big Fish was, big, or no, I'm sorry, this would have been like 97-ish, but still ska was like the thing.
Yeah.
I think like Voodoo Glow Skulls were like on fire at that time. So, I played with All Day Long for maybe 6 months or so. That band kind of dissolved. Dudes just kind of grew out of it, I guess. I was still talking to Keith, and they asked me if I wanted to come back in. They had already changed the name to Off the Record. I came back, but the main thing that happened during this time is I had picked up Suburban Teenage Wasteland from Strung Out.
Yeah, so good.
And that album just like changed me. Everything I thought I knew about guitar kind of changed me a little bit. I love that guitar tone. You know what I mean? The boosted mids, like around 14K, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I came back in. We kind of scrapped all the songs, and then we just started writing all the songs that would end up being on the album eventually.
So at this point, were you guys were you trying to make this a full-time thing, or when did it turn from kind of a just for fun or let's play music to we should pursue this and get signed?
I don't think any of us really had anything going on at that time. I think Chris was going to college, like City College. But other than that, I mean, we were working kind of like low key jobs. I don't think there was a lot going on. It wasn't really a decision that was made. Like we sat down and planned it out.
Yeah.
I think as we started playing more, and then, people started showing up more and more. We started getting asked to play more shows. I mean, we were obviously just kind of drawn to it, but it wasn't really a decision that we made. Like we're going to full on pursue this.
Right.
Dogwood actually is from San Diego.
Right.
Which was maybe like an hour and a half south of us. And, they were the biggest thing in the area. Slick Shoes was probably like an hour to the north in Redlands.
Okay.
But they didn't play a ton of shows in like the LA area. I mean, because they were out touring, maybe like the country. I don't know, but
yeah.
Dogwood would play a lot in Orange County and in LA County, and we would always, jump on a bill with them. Always with them headlining, but I mean, they were good shows. Dogwood would sell out places.
Yeah. So was that were they kind of your connection to Tooth and Nail, or did they kind of push you guys to pursue things further?
No, I mean we played shows with them, but we didn't. We weren't like super tight with them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Cool guys, but we didn't. They were doing their thing. Dogwood was already like established, though. You know what I mean? With what was the label they were on? Rescue.
Yeah, Rescue.
They had their label run before, and then they did their independent, and so they were doing their own thing. The Tooth and Nail thing came about just because when we were playing more and more shows and whatnot, we were like, well, dude, we want to record. We want to have a good album.
Yeah. I
think it was more about that than like wanting to be signed. We just wanted a good album. So Keith handled all the business stuff. Keith was really good with dealing with all that kind of stuff, which was nice because none of the other dudes in the band wanted to deal with it. So he was, putting out contacts with people, trying to see if anybody was interested. I want to say we talked to Epitaph at one point. And I think we basically talked to them. I think we sent them a demo or something.
Yeah.
And, they ended up passing eventually. And then there was a band on BEC, which was like a Tooth and Nail, spinoff or whatever.
Yeah.
Brandon Ebel owned that too. Called Flight 180.
Yeah.
You familiar with them?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So there's a dude in that band named Chris, and he worked at Tooth and Nail, and he kind of vouched for us and kind of pushed us, I guess, in front of Brandon. And that's basically how we got on Tooth and Nail. Is Chris from Flight 180 was like our connect. He got us in.
And Brandon just liked the demo enough, or was there how did that work back then? Did they fly out? Did they want to see you guys, or kind of see if you were wanting to be on the road a whole bunch, or was it just like, yeah, we like the demo, cool, put it out?
Yeah, and see, that's what's weird. I've heard stories of other people getting signed where, like, they come out, they check them out, they take them out to dinner, they do like a full conversation, like, what's your plan?
Yeah.
For us, we never talked to anybody. It was like, Chris from Flight 180, kind of liked it. He's going to vouch for us. I think Keith was friends with him. Though Brandon was never involved. I think at that point he wasn't really involved. They had another dude at Tooth and Nail that was like, there was another guy there that was kind of running the show in terms of like, being the AR.
Was that Bill
dude.
Powers?
Yeah, that's his name.
Yeah.
So, no, nobody ever contacted us. They never came and saw us play. We eventually just got contracts, and being teenage kids, we signed them without even looking at them.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, because that's such a totally different story than I've heard with pretty much all the other bands. And I wonder if some of that is just with punk being so big then that it was like, yeah, they sound cool, put it out and just kind of see what happens, right? If it goes well, then great, we'll pursue them more, and if not, then whatever.
Yeah, I think that's more of what it was, because it wasn't like, we had some history of shows that we had played, you know what I mean? I don't know if they asked other bands that maybe we had played with,
right?
But it wasn't, they didn't really come and like look into our history or anything. So I don't know exactly how that made the decision. I think you're right though, because around that album came out in, Remember When came out in 2000.
Okay.
And in that year there was like 10 like Tooth and Nail like punk albums, right? That just got fired out.
Yeah.
And everybody was being funneled through the blasting room too. I think the Tooth and Nail had like a group deal with the blasting room at the time. So I think you're right though. I think it was just kind of like, well, let's sign these guys. Let's see what happens.
Right. So you guys Remember When was recorded at the blasting room?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even that itself, like that's an amazing experience to, even if, like, to me, if nothing else even came of it, just to have, that opportunity, which I think is, which I've heard in other bands that signed Tooth and Nail, whether it's Aaron Sprinkle or, a handful of other guys that bands went to, it's just like, just an awesome opportunity to get in with a producer that otherwise might have been impossible.
Oh, for sure. I remember when we signed the contracts, and then we kind of started discussing the next step, like, where do you guys want to record? And I think we were living in the realm of reality. We weren't going to ask for like some, super famous dude. Yeah. But we actually had requested Joey Cape from Lagwagon.
Yeah.
Because he did that Atari's album, that Blue Skies one, I think.
Oh yeah.
He was doing he was producing stuff at that time, and just we wanted to go with him just because it was Joey Cape. Yeah. Whether it was going to sound good or not, it didn't really matter. So and then Tooth and Nail was kind of like, oh no, you're going to go to the blasting room. And once we realized that it was ran by Bill Stevenson and Stephen Edgerton, we were like, dude, nice.
Yeah.
Punk legends, right?
Yeah. So had you guys like toured at all much before this, besides kind of locally, or what was that all about?
Before signing and recording the album, there was no like structured like tour with like multiple stops. We had like done like, one shots where we drive out and play somewhere, but it was all pretty local.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
We hadn't ventured out like across the country or anything. Yeah,
that's something. Another thing that I don't know if I've ever really heard about. I don't, not necessarily every band mentions that, but being when we were in that place with Face Down, like they wanted to like see like, okay, do you have a track record? Can you make it on the road? Like, because if you're gonna sign with us, we want you to be on the road. 8-10 months of the year. Can you guys handle it? So it's interesting that a label like Tooth and Nail that was so prolific, wouldn't have, checked into that or cared about that or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. They picked up a couple other bands at the time too. It was kind of a similar situation.
Yeah,
because I remember playing jump ahead for a second. Later on, we went on tour with Goaty Hook and Calibretto 13. Yeah, and those guys hadn't really done much before they got picked up, like out of nowhere too. Kind of a totally different sound, but kind of a similar situation to us. In our history.
Yeah, there was definitely there was a band called Shorthanded, another one All Wound Up, like a few other punk bands that just kind of did the one album and then just kind of fizzled out. So it must have been just that was like, hey, punk is big, let's sign 10 bands. If 5 get big, then it'll be worth it for us.
Yeah, no. And I think, like what you're saying, if Tooth and Nail had done, a little more like legwork and, looked into the bands to see if they were going to, put forth the necessary effort, I don't know that some of these bands would ever put out albums, us being one of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what was that like going to record with Bill and Stefan? Was that like
it was
reality
amazing.
check for you guys, or?
It was amazing. Honestly, like for me, the best experience just out of that whole band was that situation, going there and recording with those guys. They're some of the most like down to earth dudes you'll meet, super cool. If you try and talk about All or the Descendants or Black Flag, like Bill wouldn't do it. He would get kind of shy and super humble guy. Didn't even really want to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, the blasting room at the time, I want to say it's like huge now. I think they have like 3 studios within it.
Yeah, it could be.
But at the time, it was just the one main, live room, the control room, and they had like a room in the front where it was basically like a little lounge. And the band, well, at least us anyways, like we slept there. We went up to do 5 days of recording. We slept in the studio. There was a toilet in there, but there was no shower. If you wanted to take a shower, Bill would take you back to his house, and you got to shower at Bill's house.
Sweet.
So you want to talk about a reality check?
So everyone's just like, instead of recording, you guys are like, I wouldn't mind taking a shower, actually.
Pretty much. Well, actually, the funny thing about that is in that little lounge room, there was a little TV and a VCR and a ton of like VHS tapes. One of them being Billy Madison, and what was the other one? I think Bloodsport or whatever. But essentially, we were sitting there watching these movies, and we could hear the music coming out of the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why all those stupid sound clips ended up on the album.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that because I've had multiple people mention that. Like, what was with Billy Madison? And which is funny because when that album came out, I would have had no idea what Billy Madison was. Like, I was maybe a bit more sheltered than some kids, and we didn't even have a TV until I was probably a teenager later. And so it wasn't until like years later, I don't even know when I would have picked up on that was a thing to put movie clips in music. So yeah, that was just like a joke thing. It was like, hey, we should throw some of these in the songs.
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard at that time there was a lot of bands that were doing that, putting clips in their albums. Like Lagwagon was doing it. I think Strung Out had done it too. And I think it was more just like we were sitting in that room kind of going crazy, right? We were in a different state. We didn't have a lot of money. It's not like we could go and, visit the city, hang out or whatever. We were like confined to this room. And I think we were just kind of losing our minds a little bit. So, we'd see something in the movie we were watching and we're like, oh dude, like that has to go on the album. That has to go on there. Awesome. And like each time we did it, right? Like, after we finished a song and we're like, oh, we want to put this sound clip on here. Like Bill's face, less than pleased.
Yeah, I was going to ask how we felt about that. Especially
Saturday Night Ride, with the O'Doyle Rules thing, covering the intro. You know what I mean? Like he was like, you sure you guys want to do it? And we're all laughing. We're like, yeah, dude, it's going to be great.
Oh man, but
so yeah, I mean, it was all in fun, dude. I mean, we weren't ever like really serious about anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was all just having fun,
Well, and like looking back on it, like that's what makes that album stand out is something as silly as just putting on some quotes, but right, people remember that, and so it almost makes the album more memorable because it gives it something else besides the music to kind of, attach it to or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. It gives it some character, right?
Yeah.
I guess.
Were they pretty like hard on new bands coming in, or were they like fairly graceful and kind of helping you guys, since this was like your first major recording project? So
they had us like rough demo stuff for the sake of production, and to be honest, not that many changes were made from the stuff that we had going in. I think mainly maybe with like some vocal stuff, but they didn't like restructure songs that much.
Okay.
And then Jason Livermore, he's the one that engineered it. Super cool guy also. I think when Keith started doing vocals, he kind of wanted to like gear Keith to kind of soften up a little bit and not be as like aggressive, like raspy and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when it wasn't really working, I think he was just like, well, dude, just do whatever you want, So, I mean, I think they tried to shape it like a little bit, you know what I mean? But at the same time, dude, like we were, I was 19 or 20, like I obviously knew it all. We knew it all. I remember him telling me like, dude, your tone, your guitar tone, it's like super scooped, And I was like, yeah, that's where it's at. You know what I mean? I want to hear all like low end and fizz coming out of the cabinet.
Yeah. Well, so, I remember that guitar tone standing out. I don't know if it's just kind of a heavier metallic sound to it, or I don't know. I'm not I play guitar, but I don't really know any technical stuff about it. What drew you to that guitar sound?
Oh, I had a carbon tube head and like a PD cabinet, and that distortion is the holy grail of distortion pedals, the Boss Metal Zone.
Yeah, nice.
Boss Metal Zone going straight into a clean channel, not even layered on top of a distortion. So yeah, I listen to it now and I'm like, dude, what was I thinking?
You would change that if you could?
Well, I mean, your tastes change over time. You know what I mean? And like now I'm all about like warm, like Marshall tones. You know what I mean? The scoop sound is kind of like something that I would want to stay away from. But for the time, it worked though, because especially the songs that we were writing, like if you're doing, pinch harmonics every 2 seconds, you want them to stand out. And that tone really, they all stood out, all the squeals and stuff that really stood out in the mix.
That. Yeah. I remember like first hearing that and loving it just cause it kind of had that heavier sound to it, it was different than, say like Goaty Hook. I mean, they never really had great sounding records to begin with. And I don't really know what the story is with that, but, I remember loving just, I wouldn't say there's necessarily like shreddy parts, but like the more metal influence. And so what were some of those influences on that? Like besides Strung Out, like you've mentioned, was like bands like Metallica still kind of influencing you in your playing?
No, it was never Metallica. I was never that big of a Metallica fan. And Dan, the other guitar player, we were both kind of like Lagwagon, like I was saying before, Suburban Teenage Wasteland, which if you listen to that album, you can kind of tell that I was trying to copy tones a little bit.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I hit it, but I was going for it.
Yeah.
And then also another album that you can actually hear, on the Remember When album is Good Riddance, Ballads from the Revolution.
Oh man, that album was incredible.
That's just that good, fast, hardcore stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to kind of combine like some metal aspects, but like with some of the faster hardcore type chord structures, which songs like Remember When and Empty Room kind of have that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, man, that opening track on is Remember When the opening track on that?
Yeah,
man, that song, like me and my friends, we would just crank that up so loud. Like we just love that, that minute or minute and a half intro of just those guitar parts playing. And was that like a conscious effort? Like, let's start the record with this kind of.
No, I got a funny story about that song too. So, when I wrote that song, like the metal intro kind of came about from like live shows. I mean, when we played They're like Chris, the bass player, would just go crazy, running around and whatnot. But like I noticed that people in the crowd would really latch on to these like metal breakdowns. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And that being one of them. So every time we played, we opened with "Remember When." So if you on the recording, there's like a 2-part intro, right? There's the chugs, and then the drums come in for a little bit, and then it breaks and it goes to like 2 guitars just palm muting.
Oh man.
And then it goes into the song. So when we tracked it, I didn't have the double guitar palm muted part. That's not even, I hadn't even written that, right?
Oh wow.
So we tracked the intro with like just going right into the song, right?
Yeah.
Without that part in there. And then when we were done with it, I was like, oh yeah, dude, I have this idea. They were not stoked about that.
Oh really?
Like Jason doing it. Well, because he had to cut tape and fit that part in there. You know what I mean? We had to go back and track it. I remember them being like, dude, how come you didn't say this before? And I was like, well, I didn't really think about it. There was a couple things that were just like last minute deals, in the blasting room. The end of Cheap Thrill too, with the acoustic thing.
Yeah. And
Keith yelling at the very end. That was like super last minute. Just kind of like, hey, what would happen if we threw this in here? So
yeah, well, that's some of the beauty of being in the studio. I mean, you don't want to have it so uptight that you're just doing exactly, the parts that you had prepared. Like sometimes things just kind of come to you because you're creative and all you're doing is playing music all day, and there's different ideas rolling around your head. So I'm glad you guys got to put those on, because those definitely add to the magnitude of the record.
Yeah, yeah.
So you guys, you put out this album, and then what kind of happens next? So you hand the album into Tooth and Nail. Do they like roll out like a promo kind of thing for you guys, or is it just like, cool, record will be out this day, hope you can book some tours?
Tooth and Nail actually did a decent amount of promotion for the album. I saw some like ads in magazines for it. Yeah. I mean, not like full page ads, but I mean, we weren't worthy of that anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, they did put effort into it. They sent out those little postcards with like the album cover on it. And, they honestly did more than I expected. But so when the album came out, I remember we got CDs, and I think we were told that we needed to like sell a certain amount on our own. Like on tour. And I don't remember what the number was, but I remember getting a bunch of them being like, all right, we need to clear these, within whatever amount of time. And there was no tour help from Tooth and Nail at first. It was kind of just like, you do what you got to do. We set some stuff up. I think the first tour we did was with a band called Sick of Change.
Man, I actually just did an interview with them a few days ago.
No way. Who'd you interview?
Rich and Travis.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
That record.
Dude, those guys are
so good.
Those guys are super cool.
Yeah,
super cool.
Awesome.
So we went on tour with them, and like, dude, Sick of Change was like doing it pro style already. They I think Rich actually had bought like a straight like tour van. Like one of the nice ones with the captain chairs and the TV in it and everything.
Oh man!
So the first time we went out, they took out a couple of guys from our band in their bus, basically, and me and Keith were rolling around in his Toyota Tacoma, to follow up. But it was a good tour, and on that tour we hit up Cornerstone and played the Tooth and Nail stage. This would have been...
Yeah, what year was that?
This would have been... I want to say it was 2000.
Yeah, I was there.
2000 or 2000.
I was there in 2002, and I don't think I saw you guys there, so must have been...
No, it was definitely... Yeah, it was 2000 or 2001, because it was right after the album came out, and the album came out in 2000. I'm thinking it was 2000. We actually had... what's the guitar player's name from Sick of Change? Rich's brother.
Andrew?
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew played bass for us at that show at Cornerstone because Chris hadn't come out yet. He had other stuff going on, so he filled in for us. It was super cool.
Oh, that's awesome. So was a show like that, like, were you guys well known enough at a festival like that where you would have had a good turnout?
There was people that were kind of into it from, what I remember. I actually have some pictures from that show too that were taken from the stage. And I mean, I don't think the whole crowd was into it. I don't know that we had enough notoriety to where people had heard it, or not.
Yeah.
It was a fun show. I remember that. It was like 115 degrees. Yeah, no, that's cool though. I also remember that Further Seems Forever played that day.
Oh, nice.
Like I think that was like the first time, and it had the whatever the guy's name is that went on to do Dashboard Confessional.
Yeah, Chris Carrabba.
And I remember just being blown away by that band. I was like, holy crap, they are so good live.
Did you guys like stick around for the whole week, or you just were there for the day that you played?
We played that day. I think we were there for maybe the following day, but we had a tour going. We had other spots to hit. I don't think we stayed for the whole festival.
Was that your first time at Cornerstone?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a ways from you, but I know that was kind of a gateway for a lot of people once they went there and just saw so many bands playing and wanting to play there. And well, yeah, what were your thoughts when you got there? I remember just being just so blown away by it.
Yeah, it's kind of a trip. We never really played like secular festivals, but the Cornerstone thing was different. In the merchandise tent, like all the stuff that was being sold, it was like a straight swap meet going on in there. Yeah. It was a little different. I thought it was cool though, where, you had bands that came from all over and they would drive in and just set up like shop with a generator and like jam, in certain places. I think Devil Wears Prada did that at some point, but no, it was cool. There was a lot of cool bands that were playing, and it was like a cool vibe. I don't know, me personally, like to camp there, I don't know. It looked a little rough. Those people were living hard.
Oh, it was.
You guys, did you play it, or did you like attend the festival?
Well, I attended it in 2002, so I just graduated high school, and it was like a dream come true. Tooth and nail day, and like it was insane. But yeah, like a whole week of that. You're tenting in that heat, and barely eating because I was spending all my money on merch. And it's a crazy experience, but it was insane. Yeah, we got to play it 2 years in a row after we got signed. So I mean, that was another dream come true to to get to be there and be a part of it. And yeah, that was, I mean, by then, like that was like that might have already been when it was starting to kind of die down a bit. Right. Just the headline bands weren't as big as previous years, but it was still, I mean, it was still amazing. There was still a ton of people there, and just cool to kind of be, on the inside of it, so to speak. And so, yeah, that was a really, really cool experience. So how much did you guys tour off of Remember When?
Let's see. Did that one tour, and then the other tour I was talking about, which Tooth and Nail kind of helped out with. We went out with Goaty Hook and Calibretto 13. And then that was pretty much it for me.
Okay.
For me and Dan. I mean, I think Keith had gotten married, and we weren't writing a lot of music. You know what I mean? It was just like, well, let's play these shows. The shows started getting less and less fun. Started playing a lot of like local stuff that some of them are kind of weird, like these church like one-day shows that they'd have in a gym, and they'd have bands from all over the place come around and play. And I just wasn't feeling it as much anymore. I guess my heart wasn't in it.
Yeah.
And the other guys wanted to keep going with it, so they did. But not a whole lot of touring from me. I want to say it was just those two. I feel like there was some other like short little runs, but nothing like major.
Yeah. So you just kind of said, "Hey guys, I'm kind of done with this," and just stepped down.
Uh, no, it was more, they wanted to move on and get somebody who, was more dedicated to it.
Right. Yeah. And did you feel okay
So,
about that? Like, you just kind of stopped touring and stopped being in the band, even though you'd, worked up to the point you were at?
it was weird, I guess. I mean, it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, I can see the other side of it, but I didn't, it hadn't really been discussed up until that point.
Right.
As far as not playing, in that band anymore, I guess I was okay with. It's kind of weird having, a band which you wrote a lot of the songs for, like, move on and keep playing those songs. That was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But
did you keep up with the guys after, or you kind of just let them move on and do their thing?
for a while I didn't really talk to any of them. I mean, me and Dan stayed in touch. I'm still in contact with Dan to this day.
Yeah.
Super rad guy. Chris, me and him had history before that, and I reconnected with him like a couple years later. I've never really fully connected with Keith. I think he lives on the East Coast somewhere.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, but people get older, they have kids.
Yeah.
Things change.
So did you ever miss the band or being on the road, or you'd had enough in those few years?
Did not miss being on the road at all.
That's a big part of it too, right? Like, it's easy to be excited, like, okay, we're playing locally, we're getting more attention, we've gotten signed, but especially with you guys, because you hadn't toured that much, like, that's
right.
that's a whole other beast, to handle, right? Like, it's one thing to play locally or to go record, but when you're every day in the van, different cities, set up takedowns, sleeping on floors, like, it very quickly is like, okay, this isn't as glamorous as we maybe thought it was.
No, for sure. That's like the one side of it that, like, a lot of people don't see. You know what I mean? Think about playing in bands, like, it's just all rock star stuff, partying, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, man, it's a lot of work, a lot of not showering, not sleeping. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
And I just, for me, it wasn't. Just wasn't my thing. I mean, I liked playing, and I've, played in a few bands after that. But the desire was never there to be like, oh, I want to go out and tour again.
Yeah. Yeah, but at least you did it and you knew, and I mean, at least it's worth giving a shot to say you were, on a tooth and nail band, and like, there's lots, I don't know. To me, that would be a cool thing. Maybe there's not as many people that care about that, but even still, I mean, the band, I played in, and we've been done for 10 years, and like, I still love talking about it, and, miss it. And so, right, it's a part of your life, right? You're growing, you're making memories, you're hanging out with your friends and doing stuff you never thought maybe you'd get to do. So it's, definitely a cool life experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. I have a funny story too about that Goaty Hook tour. I mean, we're Southern California kids, basically, right? We're not familiar with like hard winters or any winter at that, right?
Yeah.
So, we head out on this tour and we're going across the Midwest. And I want to say it was like in January.
Oh man.
Nobody thought to pack warm clothes.
Wow.
We're out there in like shorts and t-shirts and whatnot, right? And I want to say it was North Dakota. Right. It's snowing. I've never seen it snow that hard. Yeah. It was just snowing like crazy. We didn't have chains. We were so not prepared for it. I remember playing in this like small little basement, and it was maybe like eight kids were there. Such a rad show though, because they were so pumped that we came there to play. Mm-hmm. They were all about it. Yeah. And I'll take that over, a big festival any day.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I remember pulling my guitar out of my case, and my strings were like 3 steps sharp due to the weather, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to remedy that situation, and it was freezing in that room too. I got a gnarly like ear infection from that, the weather that night.
Yeah.
And it basically, for the rest of the tour, I was battling with that. And that same night, when we get done with the show, we go out to the van, we're loading our stuff up. It had been snowing heavily. There's snow all over the windshield. Again, being from Southern California, we're not familiar with how you take care of that situation. You guys got like scrapers for that stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Get the snow off the windshield. So we're kind of like trying to get it off. Chris has this great idea. He's like hitting it, right?
Oh, no.
With his fist. And he's like, no, you just hit it and like the snow will come off. I think even somebody said like, dude, you might break it. He's like, nah, hits it one more time and it just cracks all the way through the middle. So we had to go and get the windshield replaced. And it was just like, man, it was rough, dude. I mean, I'm sure you have like harder, tour stories, but I just remember because there was no money. You know what I mean? Yeah. There was never any money in this. Yeah. We lost money like every time we went out. So to have to shell out an extra, whatever it was, a couple $100 for a windshield, it was just a kick in the teeth.
Yeah, we had kind of the opposite. So for us, it was nice because in the winter we could go tour the States and get away from the winter. But we did one summer, our van, like the AC wasn't working and our van was overheating. And we're driving in California with the heat cranked so our van doesn't overheat. We're all just sitting in our underwear, just sweating like crazy. And so, I mean, yeah, kind of the opposite, not cold, but just a different thing to have to be accustomed to. So, but those are the memories you remember, right? If everything had just gone well that night, then you would just forget about it. And,
oh yeah,
at least you
absolutely.
Got to say you got somewhat up north and experience a different climate and whatever. And so, what are your thoughts on the off the record albums that came out after you were in it? Just being one of the primary writers beforehand, what's that like? Kind of having a band go on after.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to critique it. I feel like the second one, I mean, just the quality in the recording is so extreme, and it's the difference in them.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to judge it. I don't know. I haven't really even actually listened to that. I think I maybe heard like one song off of it.
Okay.
I did listen to, I remember when they recorded the last EP that they did, Chris hit me up and was like, hey, we're going to go record with Ryan Green, Yeah. And I was like, dude, that's rad. You know what I mean? Because back when I was in it, back when we were younger, that would have been like the ultimate goal to record with that guy, right? Because he was cranking out all the Fat Records bands, basically.
Right.
And when I heard that one, I was like, wow, man, it's a good recording, I thought they did good on that one. I thought it was a good release, different style, but it's good stuff.
Yeah. I'm definitely interested to talk with Dan more about that, just because I remember, with the second record, not being on Tooth and Nail, then kind of having a different sound, I wouldn't have known that, there was different guitar players in the band or whatever. And so I just remember being kind of thrown off like, oh, this isn't what I expected the next off the record album to sound like. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of hear the story behind that and what went into that. So,
well, actually, Dan left when I left.
Oh, okay.
Dan didn't continue on with that. Yeah, and that's another reason why it would be a extreme difference in the guitar playing is because both of the guitar players from Remember When were no longer in it.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought Dan continued on with the band then.
No, we were both out at the same time.
Yeah. Wow, that was a big hit for the band then, to have to find, two new guitar players and songwriters and
yeah, I mean, I guess there was a couple different dudes that went through, as a guitar player. I think they had like 3 or 4 different people come through and play. But I mean, at that time in this area, everybody was in a band, and we had played with so many bands that I'm sure it wasn't too hard, to find somebody.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap this up here. Yeah, man, I love getting to hear all these backstories, and I just kind of nerd out over just random information about touring and recording. And do you know by any chance how many albums Remember When sold? I'm always intrigued to kind of hear that.
I do not. I remember Keith like looking into it for SoundScan, and I don't really remember. For as far as Tooth and Nail on that album goes, I could tell you what the recording, I want to say, cost like around $16K, somewhere around there. And they gave us a $3,000 signing bonus, which we threw straight into a drum kit.
Oh, okay.
And while it seems, kind of insignificant, like at the time to get anything, we were like, heck yeah. So $3,000 was, we thought we made it. We were going to quit our jobs over that.
Man, if only you knew.
Right.
When has anybody ever said, I got $3,000, I've made it? other than punk band guys.
That's right. It didn't take much though back then, man. I remember just signing to Tooth and Nail. I was like, dude, this is as good as it's going to get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you're in a punk band, like really, what is there to do beyond that?
Right.
I mean, aside from like commercial fame, which just isn't realistic, but like, obviously like Epitaph and Fat Records would be like above, Tooth and Nail, but Tooth and Nail was up there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Cool. So in ending, I like to ask kind of a top punk records. So you mentioned that Strung Out one, and Good Riddance and Lagwagon. Do you have favorite albums from those two bands, or any other bands you'd like to mention?
Are we talking from like that era, or just like?
Well, yeah, it could be that era, or if you want to do ones from that era and also from now. I'm also intrigued to hear what guys are listening to now as well.
Sure. So yeah, definitely back then it would be Strung Out, Suburban Teenage Wasteland. I would go with also Good Riddance, Ballads from the Revolution.
Yeah.
And I would also say Bigwig, Stay Asleep was like a huge influence in what we were doing.
Yeah.
From that era. And if you want to jump ahead to now, Ignite, the last album they put out.
Man, love that so much.
Such a good album. Did you hear that they're breaking up?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I saw that.
Dude, I'm so bummed over that. But anyways, so yeah, the Ignite, Protest the Hero, Volition.
Oh, Canadian band.
Yeah, dude. I mean that whole like tech stuff, just really, it was my thing. When I heard that kind of stuff, I was like, dude, these guys like took it to like the next level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, even
fast,
like
fast songs
and the high vocals. You didn't mind?
No, I love it. It's got that old like '80s like Iron Maiden feel to it.
Yeah, for sure. We were actually on the same label as them in Canada.
No way.
Yeah, we never played with them. We were pretty drastic differently, but yeah, it was called Underground Operations.
Was that for the first album they had?
Good question. I don't even really know their discography enough. I just know that they had an album out on around the same time as ours came out.
Still though, man, that's super cool. And then I guess I'd say my last one would be I was never really a big fan of Face to Face, you know what I mean? But that last album that they put out, which they recorded at the Blasting Room, I think it's self-titled.
Protection.
Oh yeah, Protection. Yeah. Dude, that album is so good.
Yeah,
so good.
We did an episode on them as well, and we were just saying like it's crazy. I mean, they've had lots of really good albums, but I just love when bands that have been playing for 20 plus years can still put out one of their best albums, or maybe their best. Because I kind of lost interest in them for a few albums there in the middle, but yeah, that one was amazing, and I got to see them live recently, and it was so good. So. Yeah. Okay,
just the recording, everything is spot on that. They did a commentary release of that too. Yeah. It's on Spotify where the guys are just kind of talking about it. Yeah. And it's just so rad.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time to do this and just getting to talk about music and memories. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me, man. I'm really flattered that you would, want to burn an hour hearing my stories, but super cool.
Yeah, no, I love it. This is like my teenage dream coming true. So it took me about 20 years to get here, but making it happen.
Nice. Right on.